Immigrants, quite literally the building blocks of American society that were forced to perform the jobs that the Native American citizens did not want to. In my first project, I conducted an interview with my grandmother Chandra where she placed a large emphasis on immigration, so today I've brought her back to speak more on labor she performed as a new immigrant to the United States. Lucky enough for her, as a new immigrant to the country, she was granted a social security number and was given the right to collect wages legally. However, this was not the case for many immigrants who were forced to work off the books and collect less than minimum wage. According to our textbook, Humanizing Research, quote, "They worked hard, but the minimum wage established by the federal law was what most of them earned. Some earned even less." By today's standards, it seems somewhat jarring that someone could earn less than minimum wage. For 20th century immigrants, that was their reality. Now let's take a look on what Chandra's labor journey was like. So your first job, like excluding the receptionist, because that's what you consider your first, I guess, real, quote unquote, real big job. Your first job was working in a factory, correct?
Right.
And would you say that that factory job was sort of the only work you were really qualified to do as an immigrant with no education, brand new to the country? Would you say that labor was the only kind of work you had to do, or would you have been able to get other jobs?
No, labor it was.
Labor it was. And so Chandra, without any education in the United States, had no other option than to work in a factory. She recites that this was not a choice of hers, but there was little opportunity available for an 18-year-old immigrant woman, and was the same for not only immigrants of Guyanese descent, but of all different immigrant backgrounds. According to a study done by Giovanni Perry and Chad Sparber, they claimed that it was not a coincidence that immigrants were long tied with manual labor. Quote, "Immigrants are likely to have imperfect language skills, but they possess physical skills similar to those of native-born workers. Thus, they have a comparative advantage in occupations requiring manual labor tasks, while less educated native-born workers will have an advantage in jobs demanding communication skills." I feel that this quote shows the harsh reality of American industrial society. Immigrants simply did not have the skill set required of American business unless it was done in a way where they did not have to communicate with anyone. So, you got lucky enough to have that kind of job, working on the books, making minimum wage. What about your mother, Mama, when she first came to the country? Did she work?
She worked. She has not much education, but she was a very intelligent lady. And she worked with two of my sisters in a factory until they were able to put their foot down. And they were doing well. They had to pay their rent and buy food, so they took whatever job came their way.
So it wasn't really a choice of a job, it was more they took what they could get.
Yes.
Later in our interview, Chandra also mentions that her mother and sisters performed manual labor upon their arrival to the country. This was contrary to the role that Americans had set for the standard of women living within their country. According to an article, Immigrant Women and Work in New York City, Then and Now, it says, quote, "Unlike the factory where bosses were in control, women exercised real authority and set pace in their own households. Apart from nurturing and disciplining children, women managed the family budget." Unfortunately for Chandra, her mother, her sisters, and many immigrant women arriving in the 20th century, this was not a liberty that they had. While this may have been true for some female immigrants, the reality is that 20th century immigrant women were so poor that they did not only have to hold these household duties, but were also tasked with the burden of working alongside their husbands simply for making ends meet. What was it like working in that factory?
It was a lot of hard working, standing mostly, using a machine to clamp the hooks for the watches.
Chandra also speaks on the conditions in which she was forced to work. Standing all day in a factory, performing solely manual labor took a toll on her body. The article, Manufacturing Accident, Industrialism and the Worker's Body in Early Victorian Fiction, discusses how manual labor affects the bodies. While not describing the same time period as Chandra's life, there are still some ideas that remain the same. The article says, quote, "Suggestions for the removal of many of the agents which produce disease and shorten the duration of life, acknowledging that factory work for many time had an effect on the life of the people working in them." While Chandra did not mention this in her interview, her conditions of asthma and her bad knee were worsened through the labor she performed in this factory. The idea that factory work and manual labor also has a toll on the body is also supported by humanizing research. It states, quote, "While it is difficult to assess the total and direct impact immigration status has had on the lives of young people, our work clearly indicates that undocumented youth are under particularly severe psychological stress, physically demanding work earning less than minimum wage, no mobility, constrained options for economic advancement, and possibly deportation." My grandmother Chandra took much pride in the journey of labor she endured. While it may seem as though she had it rough, in the grand scheme of all immigrants, she, fortunately, did not have it as bad as many.